if we think that that is a good thing. And I think that there are some really potentially good elements to that, good aspects to that. The other piece that, as we've been going along, that has struck me in particular, so I don't tar either Leanne or Faisal with this brush, it's really mine, so if you have problems with it, take it out on me, is that I think it might be a really interesting way to start to think about the kind of allegiances that people within Canada, for example, First Nations in Canada, people will talk about their identity as a member of, for example, the Cree Nation. They also talk about themselves as Canadian, and the assumption up to now has been that the being Cree is subordinate to being Canadian. Or that if you wanted to claim the Creeness, that you had to ignore being Canadian. And I think there might be some interesting ways of using this approach to transnationalizing spaces to rethink those kinds of questions.
And so some of the ways that we're thinking about citizenship, and I think I'll just build on what Reva was saying, because there's been some interesting shifts, I think, and we were talking about this with Faisal in terms of the space and role and prominence of Indigenous and First Nations, Métis, Inuit peoples in Canada, that there's been a great push, even though we have a no national system of education, there's been a great push nationally in the different provincial education systems for more space, more inclusion of First Nations, Métis, Inuit histories and perspectives, and contrasting that with what's going on in Australia, according to Faisal. This is one of the distinctions that we're finding as we carry on this conversation. And so some of the other ways that we're thinking about citizenship is not merely just the passport or the boundaries. It's really about belonging and affiliation and membership. It's also about rights and entitlements of belonging, as well as responsibilities too. And it's about engagement. And so just to click into the next slide, which is drawing, we're sort of thinking about ways that we can use notions of feminist ethics and feminist models of citizenship to inform our thinking about this, in that they distinguish and they see this sort of networked and relational ways that we as humans live our lives. And we can all think here in this particular space right now is a kind of a complex transnationalizing space that we've all come from somewhere, we all belong to many places, we all have multiple affiliations and layers of our identities. So we think it's really useful in thinking about this notion of an ecology, an ecological model of care, and that we're all in relation, and we're also in relation to our environment. And going back to the earlier presentation, and that we have a sort of ethical responsibility to each other and to our space and to our environment as well. So we're thinking about using this notion of relational ontologies, that we are all interdependent. We are not independent, autonomous citizens. We are, in fact, embedded in these networks and larger social relations. And finally, I'll end with a quote by Iris Marion Young, a feminist political theorist, talking about how political responsibility, and we would maybe argue tentatively civic responsibility or citizenship, in a global world requires more than just stories about spatially networked, extensive networks of connection. It also needs to emphasize and take up issues of power and privilege and structures that reinforce those, as well as capacity.
And that's us.
And that's it. So we've solved that problem.
So I just want to pick up on two points. Sure. One's just a specific question about a comment you made about strategy. And I can't claim that, I get the point, but it's not my area. But you said that we don't deal with politicians on this matter, and at the same time you're looking at policy formation taking place. Because for me, one of the things we're trying to do as a network is influence policy in some way. And I'm interested in that strategy, because you're analysing policies where you haven't fed them.